everybody, and welcome to another .p Wednesday Roundtable. I'm your host, Cyphus. I'm sitting here with everybody's favorite Dr. Pepper podcaster. Last second. I'm sorry, Ursi. I'm sorry.
That hurts. Especially, like, if Wazoo was here, he would fight me. No spoilers, but he's not here. I'm a pepper. I don't know.
I was grasping, all right? It was one of those things where, as I got into it, I thought, oh shit, I didn't prepare.
I will say, as far as creepy advertisements go, Dr. Pepper, a lot of their advertising avenues, like their advertisements in the 60s and 70s, are some of the creepiest ads. Like their slogan was like, "Are you a pepper? Come be a pepper." And they have like weirdly like excited, usually blonde or brunette girls that are just like holding Dr. Pepper with like terrifyingly large grins. Yeah. Their ads are pretty.
I swear I've never seen any of those.
Well, so I work at a sports memorabilia company, so like pretty much all day I am like handling like 60s and 70s publications, like NFL programs and hockey stuff and all that. And Dr. Pepper, for like a period in like the late 60s, had a ton of advertisements in NFL programs, and they are creepy. I will say that
you can't just limit them. Like, there's a lot of pop and food commercials that were really creepy back then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're all pretty bad, especially the cigarette ads. But
I mean, like Hardee's nowadays is kind of weird. Like,
they cross the line more than anybody else. It feels like.
Well, they had
into that direction.
Yeah.
And that other voice you're hearing, of course, is the man whose name can't be spelled without two B's. That's Flubb.
Hey, thanks, Cyphus, for that. I know it's not as grand as Wazoo, but I still appreciate the truest title for me.
It's important to stay humble.
Yes.
Yeah. And those B's, those are some humble B's, you know?
Exactly.
And of course, Wazoo is not joining us today because he took a nap. And that's, that's what happens when you take a nap.
Cyph is just straight dragging Wazoo right now. Not even like, oh, Wazoo, he had a last minute, very exciting.
Oh, yeah, really important stuff going on over there.
One of the many famous actresses that he gallivants around with called him at the last moment and had an emergency.
Oh, they're off to Italy, some villa, you know how those celebrities are.
Don't I?
So today we're gonna be getting into a discussion that both Ursi and Flubb have some very, very heated opinions about. I only caught a tidbit of the pre-show conversation between you two because I was moseying around trying to kill all the noises here at my place. But I could already tell that you both have passion about our topic today, and that is what it means to be OP.
Yeah, it's something that I've argued for a really long time, probably since I've started Dota. So there's always a guy like Ursi and there's always a guy like me that are like arguing back and forth about semantics. But
and we get you both here on the show today. So to give listeners a little bit of background, we on the Monday show got into Roland. I think started just BSing about Morphling being the most OP hero of the patch or one of the top contenders. Because we got kind of spanked by a Morphling at the Battle Cup.
Yep.
And that sparked this conversation on Twitter about whether or not Morphling himself was OP and whether or not anybody is OP. Basically, right? Flubb, am I oversimplifying that?
Kind of. It's kind of more of like it's an overused term. Like, I hate when people throw it around when it means a lot more than what people give it credit for.
So, I mean, your point is that there are like variations on being overpowered.
Yeah, definitely. And it's more of like a scale where like I said this on Twitter, and it's kind of like something that I can like go in a bigger detail here. It's like when someone says that something is funny and something is hilarious. If you say something is hilarious, it's like obviously like 10 grades above funny, or like it's definitely a higher rating of making you more happy, making you just like kind of violently laugh, that type of mentality where it's like it's actually like the definition of hilarious is like something where it's like you go insane or something because it's so funny. And I feel like a lot of times people use. I feel like overpowered is like kind of how hilarious is, and if you say overpowered for the general, that person's stronger than another person, then like half the heroes in the game are overpowered. And like there was the argument kind of brought up was between me, Ursi, and Proud. And one of the things that Proud brought up was that if a person is, I asked the question like, is it overpowered for anyone to be like stronger? And he said no. If they're strong, there's a difference between strong and overpowered. And strong is like guys who don't need a nerf. They could use a nerf, but they don't need it. And I kind of asked him, well, like, why do they not need a nerf if they're stronger? And he said, if they are that at that point where they like seem a little stronger, it's probably because we haven't figured out the patch. And I kind of like, I couldn't really go into it because it's Twitter and you can only have like so many characters, and that's the shitty thing about it. But here I can say that if you look at it as an objective piece, like you don't want to say that like, okay, there's misunderstandings, because yeah, there's going to be misunderstandings for everything, and there's times where I feel like people use that word OP because of a misunderstanding. It's like someone might be under,
well, and especially at our level. I mean, everybody, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a pub and I've seen somebody type, oh, that bullshit hero, that hero's OP, that hero, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, generally, yeah, it is just a misunderstanding. It is, oh, hey, yeah, you let Slark through, and you don't have any of the heroes that are able to deal with him right now while he's kind of rampaging through pubs. You didn't pick up that timber saw, or you didn't have anybody who knew how to play the timber saw, or you didn't, that there are so many situations where we have heroes like that. And I admit that there are holes in my own knowledge. You guys were talking about like Morphling, Morphling counters or heroes that are decent for dealing with Morphling today. And I was like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have been able to name any of those heroes.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just heroes at silence. Although I will, to your credit, personally, I think Morphling is in the very, very strong category, but not OP. But to his credit, Purge, who, our Lord and Savior Purge, he thinks Morphling is the most overpowered hero of this patch, and he constantly hates on Morphling players and Morphling spammers on his videos, etc. So, to your Monday show credit, there are people that make serious claims that Morphling is overpowered. Personally, when we're talking about this specific hero, I think he's just in the strong category after his last round of nerfs.
Okay, so Ursi, where does your disagreement with Flubb come from regarding the term OP? What's the issue here? Like, I feel like we're getting super meta today here on Wednesday, where we're literally communicating about how we communicate about the meta. It's like 3 layers of meta that we're going through now.
It's important, and I do agree with Flubb in certain regards. I think people definitely throw around the term OP way too much, but I think Flubb doesn't throw it around enough. Flubb and I, we've disagreed on the show and in private and in Hakuna Round of practices and on Twitter and pretty much everywhere on many heroes that I feel you don't use the term OP enough, and that's primarily that. But also, I think OP is a legitimate term that should be used, and I think you could probably name at any given time maybe 10 heroes that are OP. And I'm in the Proud vein of thinking where I would say that a hero that is OP by definition is a hero that needs a nerf to be at a fair level, right? So like Omniknight is a perfect example. Omniknight was OP. Like no hero that has above a 55% win rate should be considered evenly powered, in my opinion. Like that's the best metric.
So okay, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, this is something that Roland and I have gotten into a little bit on Monday, but the ideal goal, right, is for literally every hero to be at a 50% win rate. I mean, wouldn't that be, if we were to like define the perfect metric, which obviously we'll never hit, but that we could strive towards, I mean, do you guys kind of agree that that's what we should be looking at, or what we should be striving for?
I don't think so.
For me, it's a resounding no. But like, go ahead, Ursi. Sorry.
I wonder if you have the same idea as me, Flubb. But in my mind, I think if every single hero was 50% win rate, the game would be boring. I think the game needs to have heroes that are situationally, like, let's say, like I'm trying to think of a good way to like encapsulate this into like an analogy or something. I think certain heroes may deserve a higher or lower win rate depending on their difficulty, and especially when you see this on like Dota Buff's meta board, for instance, where certain heroes have obviously varying win rates at various skill levels. And I think that's a good example of a hero should not just have 50% win rate. I think a hero should have a malleable win rate depending on like skill or situational picks. Like if Broodmother was just a you win half your games thing, I don't think that would be fair. Like Broodmother should have a place, and maybe her place is having a 1% pick rate but a 60% win rate, let's say. So I think there,
right?
Yeah.
So what I would argue there is, I feel like the variation that you're talking about should probably be more reflected in the pick rate as opposed to the win rate. If we're like striving towards a metric for, because like otherwise, what's the metric for balance? You know what I mean? Is it just a bunch of Dota players' opinions about whether or not a hero is overpowered or not? Because or do we actually have a statistic? Do we have something we can look at to say this hero is balanced, and here is the evidence that it is?
I think everything should be around 50% pick rate. I don't think anything should be above 55 or below 42, let's say, somewhere in that area. But I can easily see a hero where the overall, like let's take a hard hero. Let's say Earth Spirit, who has been made easier over the course of the years, but is still a difficult hero by all accounts. The hero is valued for how like his, let's see, like Meepo is another good example of this, but they have a high skill floor and a higher skill ceiling, right? So you have to practice the hero enough to reach that skill floor to be playing at a mediocre level, and it has a large skill ceiling, right? So logically speaking, a hero like that should have a higher win rate in, let's say, 5K plus games, to use the extreme, and a much lower win rate in a bracket like 2K, sub 2K. But though that hero, if you were just to say, oh, well, overall, his win rate is like 43%, just again, to throw out completely arbitrary numbers. But let's say that hero overall, since the majority of games are being played sub 3K, these hard heroes, if you judge them by that metric, they would just be getting buffed into oblivion, and then they would have like a 60% win rate in 5K plus. Because if you're judging by the overall games played of a hero that's difficult or a hero that's easy, you're going to be far away from that 50, even though the hero is relatively balanced, just because that's how the hero works, right?
Yeah. Flubb, thoughts on that?
Well, that's actually the last half of what Ursi was getting to there was actually my whole argument. If you have a high skill player, a high skill hero, and they do what is correct to the hero, they should have a higher percent win rate, because it's generally like if it's harder to play, it should be better, in my opinion. Not only because it should the player should be rewarded to go outside of their comfort zone and try more difficult, rewarding tactics, because that's what Dota is, and it's also like it's more fun to watch as a viewer. And as I look at the game, I want it to be fun for the players. I want it to be fun for the people who are watching. Even though I love Lich and it's like a classic for me, like for the longest time, Lich was pretty basic and really dumb. And I kind of didn't enjoy when people picked him. Now that there's the whole getting experience aspect, that does add a new flavor to him. And I do like that level of complexity that they added to a simple character. But once again, he's still not that much. He's not that exciting to watch. So, and he's not that exciting to play. So
not hard either.
Right.
And he has above 55% win rate. I don't want to interrupt you, but just to, use my example of heroes with 55 plus, he has a over 55% win rate in 2K to 3K.
Right. Which, it should make sense at that level though, because it's so easy to pick up and learn. So like if you're saying that everything should be 50 at every level, then it would be a resounding no. But like if you're talking about like trying to get it so that like between all the varying skill types of players from all the different regions to get it to like a 50% for all the heroes, like maybe I could argue that, but that's just like impossible, right? There's like no way that even like with its endless pursuit of trying to make it the most fair thing possible, trying to make it fair in like all regions, all metas, all like different styles that this game is played in is just, God, that is like the most daunting thing I could ever think of for a video game developer to try to wrap their head around.
Basically impossible.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm gonna shift us back to the discussion of what OP is. So what I guess we all agree the term OP gets thrown around way too much. We're in agreement there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I still feel like we don't have like this common ground of what an overpowered hero really is, because I think for Flubb, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's basically for you it's any hero that requires a nerf.
Kind of. I'm kind of under the idea of it's not any hero that requires a nerf. I feel like that's what people use it for.
Okay.
My idea is like if something is 100% first phase pick or ban because it has to be out of the game, then that's probably something that's overpowered.
Okay, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like, because we saw a lot of that even just at TI. You know, there were certain heroes that were first pick, first ban for every team. Didn't matter who you went up against, you were first banning, first picking them.
Right, mm-hmm. And a little bit of that is to do with the meta, and that's why like even I'm a little standoffish about calling something OP because it's a big stamp. I feel like when I call something like overpowered, I'm saying that like developers, you kind of screwed up here. This is a problem, fix it type thing. And changing so many things in Dota, like changing every little bit. Like we talked about before a few weeks ago, Ursi is a very good Omni player, and he pointed out that the nerf to Diffusal helped Omni out quite a bit. And if you like call for something being OP or overpowered, this needs to be nerfed right now, it kind of like I don't want to say like puts the developer in a rush, because like obviously they don't really care about that by like one person, but like if everyone keeps saying something is overpowered, that's how stuff got like nerfed into the ground in the past. And like heroes like Elder Titan for a while, like yeah, they did buff him and we didn't quite understand him, but for what was it, like a couple years, Elder Titan was like unpickable.
Yep.
And it was because like at a certain point he got to a point where he was just like, oh my god, this guy is crazy. They would put him in mid and use his Elder Spirit because it was like so powerful at the time, just to like force people out constantly. And everyone was like freaking out about how good it was, and immediately they like nerfed him down to like nothing, because you know that people were so upset about this idea of this guy being overpowered. I guess it's more of me afraid of what the power of the public can do by saying like a word like overpowered, something that is a word for that's harsher than strong. If this hero is too strong, is a better phrase than this hero is too overpowered. That's like 5 steps above the scale, in my opinion. Whereas like if I'm saying if I feel like if Ursi says it's too strong, that is the meaning of overpowered.
Okay, so Ursi, I mean, do you kind of agree that maybe the delineation is necessary with OP, or are you kind of in the camp that if you need a nerf, you're overpowered?
Yeah, I think by definition, if you are in need of a nerf, you're overpowered. I know in this Twitter discussion that I'm sure the vast majority of our listeners did not see, because many heroes could use a nerf, I would say. Like any hero or items also, especially, I think that's something that people frequently overlook, that like a hero can be made OP or underpowered based on an item nerf, entirely divergent from the actual hero itself. So that's an important, decision to make. And that's where you see a lot of these hero that used to be OP cannot be touched at all, and now suddenly he's like a really terrible hero. But I think at the most basic level, I could say a hero is truly overpowered, in my opinion, when they are, like Flubb said, first pick, first ban, or if ever I feel pigeonholed into picking a hero in a certain role. Like if I'm playing mid in 6.83, or let's say I'm playing 1 in 6.83, and I am punished for not picking sniper or troll, those heroes are overpowered, in my opinion. And it's the same way, if I'm playing 4 position in prior iterations of 6.88. If I'm playing 4 and I'm being punished for not picking Kunkka is overpowered. And that's not necessarily, he could still have a 55% win rate or a 52% win rate or whatever. But if you are actively disadvantaged for not picking a certain hero in a certain role in a regular game, barring like, oh, well, it's a counter to X, Y, or Z, that hero is overpowered. And maybe it's because of the items in that patch, maybe it's because of the metagame, maybe it's because of whatever, but something needs to be changed, whether it's the items or whether it's an adjustment to the metagame or an adjustment to the hero itself. That hero is overpowered. So yeah, that's my basic thing. And I do think overpowered is a useful term, but I don't think, again, we already agreed that it's used too much right now, because a lot of people use that like knee jerk, like you guys on the Monday show, you guys had just lost to a Morphling. So you had that visceral reaction. You're like, this is the most overpowered thing I've ever seen. And I do this too all the time. My Twitter, not recently, but historically, has been a lot of like, how is OD even a hero in this game? Like, because it's that visceral knee-jerk reaction. And that's what Reddit is a lot of the time.
Okay, so I'm gonna get a little like super geeky here now with stats. This is how we're gonna try to frame this. So with Ursi's metric for the 55% above on a win rate, and focusing in on the high skill being where that 55% line probably is most, where it's most important that it doesn't be crossed.
Can I not to interrupt you, but just so we don't continue with that, I think median skills should be where this is applicable. Like, even maybe higher than median, but still medium, like 3K. So like I would say the most important value set would be 2K to 3K and 3K to 4K.
Okay, so looking at like 5K plus first, let's just talk about that. 2 heroes have over 55% as a win rate. That would be Omniknight, sitting at a nice 60% even, and the second Underlord, Ursa, your favorite OP hero in the game, with a 56.27%. Beyond that, everything else is, hovering in that 45 to 55% range.
Yep.
Do those, and we all know Omniknight, right? Like what is, and I know we've even gotten into it on this show, being able to keep idiots alive. Like at the end of the day is the easiest way to describe what makes Omniknight super fucking powerful. Being able to literally block every type of damage and dish out pure damage at a mass rate early on and heal is disgusting.
Yeah, and his counters are very specific. So if you get 5th picked Omniknighted, or if you don't have diffusal carriers, or even if you buy a diffusal, your counter runs out after a little while. So
yeah. So we know that. We know what kind of makes that, and I dare say we don't want to delve back into the Underlord debate here.
Well, he just got nerfs, so some people, namely Flubb, are going to make the argument that he's balanced now. The numbers show that is not true. And
actually, I will come out and say, Ursi, even though I said it before, I said he needed a nerf before. I just didn't freak out as much as you did.
You specifically said he needed an atrophy or a nerf.
I will admit he was overpowered before that patch,
and is still overpowered now.
Maybe.
This is the primary thing that I take issue with Flubb. It's that I think we both have a reasonably similar, if not exactly similar, well, almost certainly not exactly similar, but we have a similar concept of the term overpowered, but I relegate it to a specific subset of heroes, and Flubb never uses it on anything, apparently. And that's what I take issue with, is that on many occasions when a thing is drastically underpowered or overpowered and it's clear to everybody, I still get argued with by Flubb or like certain other people. And that's what bothers me, is like the hesitance to use a word when it's necessary.
Okay. Well, the thing is that like Omniknight is overpowered though. I will say that. Like that's obvious. I've never really argued that point with you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue that point. I think
Right,
everybody.
'cause that's suicide. But I feel like Overlord is still very strong at this point right now, and he is probably needing a nerf. I would probably go as far to say OP at this point. Truthfully, I just haven't witnessed enough of the patch yet. In my opinion, I haven't given it a few diligence of like a couple weeks. I know it's been like a week, right? Has it been a couple weeks already?
No, it's been 1 week because we did the patch notes review last Thursday.
Okay, that's what I thought. So, I mean, it's not like we've had a bunch of time to see how much it affects it. And I feel like his like availability as a support has gone down quite a bit because of that. Just having like one level in a trophy lore was just like ridiculous to be able to support and like keep that person down. It's kind of like he's just like kind of built more towards a core now, which does hurt the hero as a whole when you have to like pigeonhole him into certain positions. But you're right, they didn't take away a lot. They just took away the trophy lore, which I called. Just wanted to say.
Yeah, and he's still overpowered, so you didn't call enough.
Okay, all right. Here's where I want to take. So the reason I bring those two heroes up is because Omni, I feel like his statistics kind of demonstrate like what an OP hero is. He's at a 61%, and I'm rounding up here, folks. 61% at sub 2K, 62% 2 to 3K, 61% at 3 to 4K, 60% at 4K to 5K, and 60% in the 5K plus. So Omniknight manages to achieve 60% win rate, whether you are one of the best players in the world or one of the newbiest players in the world. Mm-hmm. You can achieve that 60% win rate with him. Underlord, similar stuff. He's 53% at under 2K. He's 54% at 2 to 3, 55 at 3 to 4, 56 at 4 to 5, 56 at 5 plus. But then we get I mean, is that what you're talking about? Like, is that what we want to define as being OP? Heroes that can achieve those kinds of win rates across all skill levels, regardless of skill.
I think that is a good way to put it, Cyphus. I would not argue that fact, and because you read those numbers to me, I will concede that Ursi is the victor on that argument. Okay, yeah. He's OP. He's OP.
I think Underlord really. So now I feel like I need to expand my definition of OP because Underlord has reignited my passion in the. When thinking of heroes that are OP, in my mind, and this may be a bit more arguable, but when I think of heroes that are OP, there's two real big factors. It's other than heroes that just numerically are OP, like, you know, if a hero has a 70% win rate, you can say, like, yeah, universally that hero's OP or 60% win rate. But I think, in my mind, what jumps out to me is heroes that are OP are heroes that either do many, many things well and make it so you would never pick a different hero. Like, for instance, Underlord does all the things Jakiro does, but better. So he is, in comparison to a similar hero that does similar things, overpowered. Or one could say the other hero is underpowered. But regardless, so if they do many, many things well and facilitate a lot of different needs and don't have like any niche they fill and don't have any clear weaknesses, or heroes that are good in all phases of the game. I think, and this is one of the main issues we've seen with especially carries and mids that have been overpowered before. Heroes like Troll or Sniper, using them as like the best examples of this, but even heroes like OD, heroes that, or Spectre. Spectre's another good example, like Badman era Spectre or Roland era Spectre. That hero, instead of being a balanced hero like she is now, where it's like, all right, well, her early game's weak, her mid game's okay, but her late game's super, super strong, or any other example, like some supports are balanced around having a really strong early game and a mediocre mid game and a weak late game, stuff like that, right? Heroes have to have strengths and weaknesses. Heroes that don't have weaknesses are overpowered, in my opinion. So if you are not going to be weak in any phase of the game, or you're not going to be weak because you have a little farm, or you're not going to be weak because of X, Y, or Z. You are too powerful. Like, Dota is a game of peaks and valleys, right? It's a game of, my power peak on Viper is at like 15 minutes when I have my mech, and my valley on Viper is, an hour where I've capped out and I'm a garbage hero. So I think that's an important thing to think of, right? If a hero has no valleys and only peaks, that hero is overpowered, right?
Yeah.
So Underlord, by my first definition, is overpowered, right? Because he just does so many things that if you were picking other heroes, it would require you to pick 2 or 3 heroes to do what he does. Also, one can make the argument, heroes that do something that no other hero can, that's truly game-changing, have the potential to be overpowered. They're not overpowered by definition, but a hero like Morphling can feel overpowered if he is in the right situation because he is so unique unto himself. Or Techies, back when Techies was OP. So I realize I've opened up a bag of worms because that definition is much wider. But those are serious factors in me calling a hero OP. If I don't feel like there's any, if I feel like I'm never going to have a point in the game where I am just by definition better than a hero, or like if a hero doesn't have a counter, then it's like, well, what do I do? Drought this patch, one could make the argument that Drought's OP because they changed her peaks and valleys, where she used to peak in those pushing stages and valley in the late game. But now, not so much now, but 6.88D, she was clearly overpowered, right? Because she had only peaks, and she peaked and she stayed at that peak after she hit level 8 with Dragon Lance.
Yeah,
that's a larger, more abusable definition for the sake of argument that I would make.
And I also feel like, though, if you're also got to put in time, because a lot of people call those things imbalanced, the first week someone discovers this new idea. They're like, oh man, this shit's overpowered and there's nothing that we can do about it. What are we going to do for our game? What are we going to do for how we go about the next game? And they just don't think about it because the pros haven't figured it out yet, so no one can figure it out yet. And to their credit, one of the people who is probably one of the smartest people at this game right now can't figure it out. It's going to be hard for me too, but I still feel like that there's stuff out there half the time that people are just not thinking of, or just not playing a hero that exists right now in a certain new style that can maybe add something else to the mix that it wasn't previously thought of. Elder Titan was kind of that thing, right? Because he wasn't used, I'm pretty sure, at the beginning of this patch at all, and then all of a sudden he was oh my god, this hero's picked constantly. And then there's so many heroes like that this patch where they've fallen in and out of favor because people have learned certain methods on how you move around them. And also there's been nerfs. There's been significant number of nerfs going through it and changing up those heroes. But I just always want to preface that what you're saying is great, Ursi, but also give it time, because time reveals what is truly overpowered if something stays at that height for a really long time.
All right, so here's where I want to break in, because I disagree with that. I think that you can probably predict. I think there's a way to analyze things going forward where you can get somewhat predictive about what's going to be on the rise and who's going to rise in percentage, who's going to rise and who's going to decline. And we were kind of getting into it a little bit on Monday, and Ursi, you and I talked somewhat about it at the start, in the pre-show. But Centaur, my big point to Roland on Monday was that, hey, Centaur is a hero who has escaped a nerf since 685, right? So, and yes, maybe he's not getting a buff. In fact, he's gotten no attention, more or less, it seems since 685.
They buff return.
Changelog. Yeah. But super minor, right? It was a percentage or 2%, I think.
More or less. Although he's received
level.
Like a lot of heroes, like I was talking about earlier, he's received indirect buffs through items and meta changes. So that's something,
right.
A hero can be untouched, but if the item that they buy or an item, and if an item they buy gets cheaper, like Hood got extremely cheap compared to how it used to be, and so Centaur naturally got better. Stuff like that.
Right. Well, and the way the blade mail now reflects damage back, doubling up on blade mail with return, and
I guess you don't build blade mail on Centaur though. But
oh, really? I build blade mail on Centaur. I won't lie.
I mean, it's not bad. It's just like you already have return, which is effectively blade mail. But
I could be returning twice the damage, Ursi.
But you got to have the health to do it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tank up along the way.
Anyway,
Come on now.
This is an old Centaur, man. Old Centaur, you did that for sure because he had strength buff. He didn't have his make everyone run really fast. It was drow ability for Centaur, but it was strength.
I did not know that.
Yep.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think don't you think there are ways that we can kind of look at just surely by looking at the patch notes. I mean, this is where theory crafting at the pro level comes into play. I mean, this is where correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of goes into some of the theory crafting that you and Proud do on Thursdays, right? Yeah. I mean, taking into consideration, okay, well, looking at the patch notes and thinking about the history with these particular heroes and who has escaped nerfs and who's been receiving them and who's been who's been getting buffed. I mean, hell, even as a noob, I know if I can take a look at patch notes and see who's been getting buffed, I can take advantage of playing that hero and at least see it perform better than it did before.
Right, but do you know the extent of trying to play something new and unseen or something that you haven't seen yet within like the last few years that's like fell out of favor but has the ability to come through again through all the patches that have existed from now since like 3 years ago and have the it's one thing to theory craft it and like everyone's trying to do that and I fully accept that you guys are trying to do it and that's what you guys feel like you can achieve and that's good. I want you to achieve that. I want you to go beyond that. I'm saying that I don't think that people give it enough time. I don't think that feel like people pour through the patches enough to see what is available to them to stop this menace from moving on. Like you can look at what's popular and see why he's working and like look up and see the data when someone's already done it for you. But if you go in there by yourself and like do exactly what you just said, see, okay, over the past few years, these buffs have been going over this character. If we play him in a new direction or new style, like, obviously Mirana didn't become good until Ags came out, in the way that she did, but she did a 180 on how you play her as a core, just with that one item. Obviously, it's a very big item, and it's like the only reason why she works as a magical damage dealing core now. But I guess the focus that I'm saying is that like if you're looking at the patches and you're seeing what's available to you in the future, then you could get around a lot of these things that people might call overpowered in the first place.
So I think it goes both ways. So in many instances in patch notes, there are times when one single change makes a hero overpowered, right? With the Mirana Ags, she was a mediocre hero before that was played in 4 position and sometimes offlane or whatever. Then you give her Ags, suddenly she's like top tier, first pick, first ban, everybody's running her mid or running her offlane or running her support, do whatever. That is a singular change that made a hero jump from being mediocre to overpowered, right? But then you have another path to being overpowered, which is getting small buffs over a long course of time, like Kunkka. I think many people would say that 4-position Kunkka was overpowered around TI. Now he's much more balanced and he's way worse after the recent nerfs. But that hero did not receive a singular buff that was like, oh wow, let's pick Kunkka. He received a lot of minor buffs over the course of many patches. And that is how he became overpowered, right? And also he's a low pick rate hero, which helps. But so it can go both ways, right? You can have a hero become overpowered or underpowered for that matter with one single change and one single patch. And you can also have a hero become overpowered or underpowered over many little changes. But, I mean, if there is one thing that we can all say, it's that everybody, whether you're 1K or 9K, should be reading patch notes. And even if you think, even past reading them, you should be watching or listening to analyses of them, because people will open your eyes to things you hadn't thought about, and talk about them with your friends. Like, I know I learn a ton about patch notes and all that from doing the Thursday show analysis of patch notes and talking about it with people. And I listen to, usually every big patch, I listen to like 16 hours or so of patch notes analysis from like every pro player that releases one, every like high tier caster that releases one, like just fiend that stuff and you will learn a lot. So even without playing the game, you can learn a lot of things from patches. And sometimes singular changes happen that like you don't even need to play the patch. Like you'll just see it and say that's overpowered, and you'll be right. And other times you'll be wrong. But patch notes can be indicative of serious changes in power.
So I want to, before we wrap everything up, but before we get to the end of the show, looking at like heroes then on the flip side that are, sub 40, and I think Ursi, you kind of expanded it a little bit to like 42 to 55% is kind of the sweet spot. But I mean, it certainly feels low to me to be below 45% when all things are considered.
Yeah.
But even at 5K plus, there are about like 6 or 7 heroes that are, sub 42% or 42% or below. We mentioned Broodmother. You talked about her, and kind of makes sense. Enchantress is there, which actually I thought was kind of surprising. I know she was. I can't remember the last patch or the patch where she got the major nerf, but
this one,
it was okay. So I mean, because we saw a lot of Enchantress recently. It felt like Wind Ranger, Phantom Lancer, Techies, Gyrocopter, Nature's Prophet, and poor my boy Bristleback all the way there at the bottom with a measly 38% win rate.
Yeah, but almost 50 in sub 2K and almost 50 in 2K 3K. Well, 48, but.
But even still, I mean, so looking at that, sure, I think kind of the inverse becomes almost true. When we see that kind of rise, that steady rise towards the lower skill, like, yeah, of course, lower skilled players are going to outperform roughly the same, maybe no matter what hero you throw them on. You know what I mean? So if the high skill players who are performing at the best on that hero are performing at a 38% win rate, 39% win rate, it makes sense that we'd still see Bristle somewhere near 50, for sub 2K.
I mean, it's the opposite for other heroes, though. I would disagree wholeheartedly with that statement, right? Because some heroes are bad because of the hero. Other heroes are bad because people know how to counter it, right? So Bristle is really bad in 5K plus because people know, let's build Silver Edge. And he's only, he's mediocre in sub 2K and only a little bit bad in 2K, 3K, 4K, 3K, 4K. Because people don't think and build around those counters so often, right? Whereas a hero like, let's see, Lena only rises in what's it called, win rate as you go up the brackets, right? She goes from 43 to 44 to 44.4 to 45.75 up to 46 as you go from 2K to 2K, 3K, 3K, 4K, etc. So it can go both ways, right? Because some heroes are dealt with well by skilled opponents, and other heroes are weak, but skilled players can make them work. So that's an important distinction to make.
Well, also the heroes that are good against Bristle are also pretty strong right now too, and almost in every game. So, it's not only one that there's an item that completely shuts down the hero. So smart teams will be able to learn how to build around that and stop it. It's also that the heroes that are naturally, you don't even have to build that item to be in a game. It's going to hurt that hero to have them as a popular idea. No bounce back whenever those heroes get nerfed. That's how it always happens.
But I mean, so when you look at on the flip side, when you look at Bristleback here, and Nature's Prophet, I think these are all relatively notable because they kind of follow the same trend, but Bristleback, Nature's Prophet, and Gyrocopter. And of course we saw Nature's day to shine, and we really saw Gyro's, time of the sun, even since we've been podcasting. But I mean, are those heroes on the flip side of the OP heroes that deserve a nerf, are these heroes that deserve a buff?
Yeah, I mean, by definition, right? They have abysmal win rates in comparison to like an average win rate of 50%, let's say. If a hero is way, way lower, that is indicative of the fact that they need a buff. And that does not necessarily mean that they need a buff to the hero. That means they need a buff maybe to, the metagame. Maybe the metagame just doesn't fit them. Or maybe they need a buff to their core items. Or maybe the heroes that beat them and are like hard counters to them should be nerfed, right? Broodmother is a good example, right? Because a lot of the Broodmother counters have been buffed over the course of the last few patches. And she has gotten minor nerfs, if I recall correctly. Or significant nerfs, maybe even. Over the last couple patches, right? So you can't look at heroes singularly, right? You have to look at them holistically with the entire set of 112 or 117 or whatever it is. So that is why, there's no cure-all for like, oh, well, my hero has a 30% win rate and, you can't just say, all right, well, we're going to give you 20% more strength in your abilities and in your et cetera. Right? There's no like easy thing. Like different heroes have different problems. Like PL has an abysmal win rate, not necessarily because the hero is terrible, but because the hero has a lot of counters that are popular, and his counters have received buffs, and he has received minor nerfs and stuff like that. Whereas a hero like Bristleback, it has more problems, less because of his kit individually, and more because of how the metagame works out and the popular heroes. Right, so all these heroes need buffs, but that does not necessarily mean in a literal sense that the hero needs a buff. It means, oh, well, maybe Dragonlance needs a nerf, or maybe, X, Y, or Z, or maybe raindrops need to be deleted from the game in Alina's case. Who knows? Like, right, it's different solutions for different problems.
I also think that, like, for me personally, I think that the biggest problem of, like, what happened the last patch and why it's kind of... I mean, it's still a great patch, and there's a lot of things that were done that were really nice to see and have. But like, if I take the idea of the patch and say what went wrong with it, it's that we introduced way too many items too fast. Like, a lot of the heroes that we were talking about are heroes that like got super buffed by these new items or got super nerfed by these new items. Like, man, Hurricane Pike. A lot of the heroes that we were talking about really benefit from that item that are really good right now, like Drow, OD, the Morphling, for example. There's like a lot of things that are around that item that makes them hard to use. Whereas, like, same thing with Bristleback, we were talking about Silver Edge just like shutting down that hero. Now Silver Edge is like not like it's been nerfed in the last little bit, so it's seen its heyday, and it's kind of at a decent level in my opinion now. But I feel like if like this next patch they worked on heroes more and just like balance the items a little bit, not create any more new ones, it'll go a lot smoother, and that's probably what they would need to do. I feel like if we introduce like 5 new items again, it would just throw everything way off kilter, and like there would not have for some reason I feel like maybe Lycan would be crazy because they'll give them like a super push item or something dumb like that, and we'll have to do this whole thing. We'll have to have like 20 nerfs just to like bring everything back into a reasonable spot.
But isn't that really the only thing, because I think the overwhelming consensus, and maybe you two can kind of weigh in on this yourselves, but I think the overwhelming consensus is that that 688 has been the most balanced patch we've had in a very long time, maybe ever in Dota's history.
Yeah.
With the viability of so many heroes, and even as Ursi, you've pointed out, like, yes, some of these heroes may have a sub 42% win rate or a sub 40% win rate in certain cases, but that's because they don't fit into certain comps at certain times, and they have very, very specific times to be used. But regardless, we still see nearly every hero get picked every time there's a pro tournament. Isn't the only direction we can go if we get another big patch down the road to add additional items that inevitably throw the game out of whack, or is there something else that we can do that doesn't doesn't so drastically throw off the balance that this patch attempted to achieve.
I think regarding like this patch being the best patch, I think everybody could agree just by the pick rates of heroes and like the ability for you to pick a lot of different heroes that this patch is the most balanced. By no means is it perfectly balanced. I think we can all agree on that too. But I also think when you have whatever it was at TI, like 104 heroes picked, and we've had minor changes to the patch over the course of time, but that further means that the heroes that aren't picked are really, truly weak. And a lot of the heroes that were only picked once, like, just lost. So I think that's another good example. Or the heroes that were picked, the top 10 heroes that were picked, like, X amount more often, they could be arguably overpowered. Although definitely wouldn't universally say that. Though I think regarding, changes to the game in 6.89 or 6.9, the changes need to be made clearly. Like, the game needs to be fresh, right? And whether that's adding new heroes or changing the map a little or adding new items, I think it has to happen. And these kind of shakeups are good for the overall game, even though they may in the short term make certain heroes way too strong or certain heroes way too weak. But I mean, you can't just say, like, all right, everybody's around a 50% win rate, and then you can't just say, like, all right, we're going to buff these 8 heroes that weren't picked, we're going to nerf the top 5, and then everything will be fine, and we're just going to throw a bunch of stuff in, right? That's not going to work. You got to say, all right, we're introducing an item called Iron Talon, and it's going to make jungling really good. How is that going to make X hero, how is that going to affect, X hero, let's say Beastmaster? You're going to say, all right, this makes him way too strong. And then you're going to say, all right, we're going to introduce Iron Talon, and we're going to have to do some minor nerfs to boars and make them less tanky. Or we're going to need to give him a little less strength, or we're going to need to do X, Y, and Z, right? So, and Valve obviously are thinking about this kind of thing. An Ice Frog will save us all from whatever calamity that may or may not happen. So, you can think of these larger things. And whenever a patch is released, generally like that first patch, like pre whatever 6.89b, it's pretty much like just a large scale play testing. So yeah, I mean, I think things need to be shooken up.
Flubb, thoughts?
I definitely agree. I think things need to be shaken up, but you got to realize that Dota's items have always been a gradual increase. There's not really a lot of items that drop at one time. And though that was successful this last couple patches where we've had like these big item drops where like a bunch of new items get added to the field of play, like, I mean, Mango is something that's like pretty standardized now for the idea, and it's not like seeing like too much love, too much hate. It's like kind of filtered to a good point. But the thing is like that is still a really new item if you're looking at like the history of Dota.
Yeah.
And it had the potential of like doing something really insane because it was introducing something that's like not, it's like both it and Fairy Fire, like instant health and instant mana. That's like, wow, like that hasn't existed in Dota since like the creation of Arcane Boots, and it used to be an Arcane Ring before that. There wasn't even boots. So like there's like some things that it's a little risky that they go down like these paths, and I just don't want them to like add another like 7 items that to come out and like, okay, we're gonna fix everybody by adding new items, and then 2 of those items like work incredibly well on anti-mage, and then we'll see nothing for but anti-mage as a carry for like 4 months until we gotta nerf these items again and fix it up, while also nerfing like Hurricane Pike or nerfing, or buffing other items. Maybe, they'll nerf Hurricane Pike and it'll make I don't know, Yasha really good, or it'll make Scotty good. They'll make Scotty good again or something, and it'll freak something out of whack. It's just like I love how many variables Dota has, but I feel like they need to slow down on their creation process because it's just, I don't want it to become League of Legends. I don't want to have the situation of a hero coming out or a new item coming out like every week, and they don't do that, but they save these patches for like twice a year to like unload a shit ton on us. Like, okay, we're gonna throw you into the deep end. Let's we hope this patch works.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
Also,
All right.
yeah. Also, like my last addendum is that an important thing to think about is that Valve has been, especially with the current drama argument, considering like the stun bars and stuff, they're trying to make the game more accessible for newer players and completely new players and people still learning at a low level. So when they add new items and don't take away old items, that just means there's more burden of knowledge to get to learn to play Dota, which is an incredibly gargantuan task. I mean, we all know people with thousands of hours that like are not a master of the game, right? And you would think with anything else, you'd think, I can't think of any other video game that I would spend thousands of hours playing or know people that have spent hours without thousands of hours of playing and wouldn't consider them good. Like, when a game is that difficult, adding stuff onto that is like a real serious, burden of knowledge is the best way to put it, right? Yeah. So Valve is clearly thinking of that as they try to make the game easier to jump into. Maybe they're going to say, we have whatever it is, 120, 130 items. Maybe let's not add a bunch. Like maybe we'll add one or two, or maybe we'll change existing items or whatever. So it's an important thing to think about.
Yeah, I guess at the same time, adding any item, right? I mean, in the long run, if you, even if you only add an item a patch and we have, or let's say 2 or 3 items a patch more realistically, and then we have 2 to 4 patches a year, you're still adding nearly a dozen items. You're still adding, you're still exponentially almost increasing the amount of knowledge that somebody has to attain if they come in as a brand new player right at that point.
We have had a lot of patches that have not added items, though, to be fair. Just recently, the last few patches have had items brought in. And also, sometimes items are brought in, and you can just ignore old items. Like, Heaven's Halberd is an item that nobody buys because it's garbage. And, except for specific heroes. So, when one item is added, this is not a perfect example, but let's use Echo Saber. Echo Saber is added, so you need to learn Echo Saber if you're a new player. But you don't really need to learn Halberd because nobody buys that anyway. So whatever. Or
But at the same time, you wind up the disadvantage that you wind up being in as a new player is, I lack that knowledge that somebody who played when Heaven's Halberd was a thing has access to be better in that situation. To know, hey, I'm going up against that Huskar. Hey, maybe I need a Heaven's Halberd this time around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's obviously it's not a perfect example, but there are instances where items are brought into the game, and other items are phased out for a period of time and need to be buffed. Like when Scotty was really, really good. Actually, this is a bad example, but I was gonna say, let's say hypothetically, right? Next patch, Scotty gets buffed a lot, and S and Y gets nerfed a lot. You need the burden of knowledge values Scotty much higher, so a new player can learn Scotty and just ignore Saint Inyasha, right? So when there are clearer items that are more important and the person can be brought in and learn those, then they can learn all the little situational items later. That in its own way is a way of conquering the burden of knowledge, even though, sure, they're disadvantaged because other people may have that knowledge, but what can you do, right? That's just how the game works because it's complicated. Right, you could expect anything.
I'm going to close this out, folks, but I'm going to give you that minute as promised at the end of every episode. Flubb, you got 1 minute. Anything else you want to address, or any final points you feel like need to be made about the discussion today?
I think that when people are looking at a character and they want to say something is overpowered, if you're going from a scale and if you say that anything that is needing a nerf is overpowered, it's a little much for me personally, and I think it should be for everyone else. I think that the way that you look at it is because if you were to say that everything that needs a nerf is overpowered, I would say that everything that is more powerful than what is normal is technically overpowered then if it's needing a nerf, because then it's not because the idea is that we understand what the patch is, and over time, if this was the rest of what Dota is now, is it overpowered at this point? That's how I look at it, I guess. And it was kind of something that I should have said earlier, because I know I'm probably making Ursi like turn in his chair right now.
Oh, that's fine. I'm formulating my response. It's irrelevant to you. I'm thinking of something else.
All right, Ursi.
All right, so here goes. I'm going to dedicate my last give or take minute to making a grand philosophical statement. Flubb brought it up. And I'm just going to expand on it. But language is important, and this includes everything, whether it's language describing Dota, or language talking to your friends, or language talking to random people, right? And so, there's a reason why we don't use certain words, especially in the .p community, right? We have certain things where it's like, well, if you say that, you're going to get banned, right? So language is important, whether it's something like that in casual conversation, or language regarding the specifics of a game, or, even specifics in like science or history or whatever, right? Language is important, and choosing your words carefully. And if somebody uses a statement like overpowered that never uses the statement, that holds a lot of weight. Whereas if some random guy, let's just use me for an example, calls everything he loses to overpowered, then you don't value that statement, right? So that's why when we read X hero's overpowered on Reddit, we ignore it usually. Well, if we see it 30 times from 30 different people, maybe. But language is important, right? So think before you say things like, oh, this is just overpowered, right? Say, this was strong, but why did we lose to it? Am I losing to this every game, or was it just 2 games? Like, also certain things feel overpowered when you lose to them, even though they're not overpowered, like Morphling or Slark.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess for my last minute, I'm just going to say fuck Omniknight and
buff Lena. Sorry, a call.
Sure, yeah, all right. I'll put out a call to buff the Lena. Sure, she deserves it. She's been, she's been kind of backseated by Valve for way too long, it feels like.
She deserves a 60% win rate. That's all I'm saying.
You know who I miss, and I'm gonna regret saying this because I hated him for a while but Tusk. I loved playing Tusk so much.
Snowball is the most overpowered ability in the game.
Oh, it's so great, buddy. It's so.
I say that sarcastically.
I do miss Tusk. I do miss Tusk as well.
Like getting those ice walls on those key choke points. Just nothing better than that.
Yeah, I wish we had another 15 minutes to talk about to talk about spells being overpowered, because that's when I really throw around the term. And certain spells are overpowered, and Snowball overpowered.
I know what we're gonna talk about next week. All right, folks, if you guys want to find us, we can find us at defenseofthepatients.com. You can find links to all of our cool stuff there. The Amazon banner, which apparently only works in the United States. But hey, if you're in the U.S., go ahead and click through that. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps out the show. You can also find us over at patreon.com/defenseofthepatients, where you can right now for, I think it's $20, right, Ursi? You can sign up for a replay review. And I know one gentleman already sent in the match ID. I'm going to pass along, I think, to you. I need to hit him up and see. We're trying to give people the choice of show hosts, but it doesn't always work depending on schedules and timing.
And if you're sending in a match ID, I need to get that right away, or download the DEM file and then send us that, because replays expire.
Yeah, should we have
after
a
week
box or something? Is that
this sounds like a non-show topic,
yeah.
But if you are requesting a replay, the easiest thing to do is download it on your computer, get the DEM file. It's in your whatever C Dota 2 replays folder. Send that to us. Email that with whatever. That's the easiest way to do it. If you have a specific replay you want done.
Yeah, so hit us up, if you've donated and you want to get access to one of the show hosts doing that. Email us at defenseofthepatients@gmail.com. Let us know that you donated, and come November, we're going to start trying to shell all those out. So you can also find us on Twitter at .p_show. You can find me at .p_Cyphus, Ursinity at Ursinity, and Flubb at FlubbDota with 2 B's. Of course, defenseofthepatients@gmail.com, like I said. Of course, iTunes. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all your favorite podcast apps. Go look us up there and leave us a review, because that really helps the show. And we're trying to read those on the Monday show as much as possible. It's been a trip going through and seeing all of the foreign reviews, because for so long, as I'm sure you both know, we only had access to the U.S. reviews, or only knew that we were reviewing U.S. reviews. So it's been kind of cool to go through and see what everybody else says in the other parts of the world. Did I miss anything? YouTube.com/.ptv1, and of course twitch.tv/.ptv. That's where you can find the in-houses run by Mr. Grouty himself. And those, if you're listening to this on Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon, hey, there's still time to come stop by an in-house. And you might even see Ursinity and Flubb there if they're not, practicing.
Well, unfortunately, we have team practice Wednesday nights at the exact same time, so I don't know how it is in the cards for us to be playing in houses anymore.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We just put Ham up there, and then that's how you guys get your scrims.
Yeah, I think
5 random .p folks.
That would not be fun for our opponents, and I think our teammates would have an aneurysm with how unproductive that would be. Because now we're only practicing 2 days a week, and even though our Sunday practice is like 6 hours long, people would be unhappy. Proud has voiced that many times.
You're gonna get all those 5K plus guys that are constantly bitching about not having a game on a Wednesday night, at the in houses. I'll just grab all those guys and put them up against you. It'll be fine, right?
That's fine.
Yeah, that works.
But anyway, tune in. I know I'm going to try to pop in this Wednesday. I suspect we'll see a lot more of Roland because we freed up the Wednesday nights for him recording. So I think you'll see him popping in a little more frequently. And I don't think I got to make it to the last one, but they're always fun. It's always fun to show up and play in those games.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good time. And great casters, great folks helping with all of that. So be sure to tune in. Anything you guys can think I missed?
No, you missed the subreddit, but Flubb, I meant to bring this up to you, but I'm thinking of leaving Hakuna Marana just so I can play in the in-houses again. Or cast the in-houses, because that's a good time. So that's how good they are.
They are.
Yeah, they are a blast.
Yeah.
So
I may not be too far behind you then, Ursi.
Good. And then I can rejoin Ham and be mid.
Dude, you can take it at this point, man.
I'll take it. Let's go have a discussion outside.
Yeah. There you go.
All right, folks. Until next time, this is Cyphus for Ursi and Flubb saying good luck and Godspeed.